Oh, hi all. Welcome back to the 1 minute farming videos and the continued strip down of the 1943 Model A. Now, progress has slowed down a little bit of late as I've been lambing, and we're still on planting corn and oilseed rape, but I did get a bit done the other night. It was a quiet night in the lambing sheds, and so we managed to pull the pulley off and all its associated parts. So just to recap on what we did, the pulley there with its primary gear, etc., would have been in the hole there first, so it would have been in like that, and then you would have had the driver inside the pulley with the clutch plates, and you would have then had the clutch fork in this slot down here, which is laid behind me. Just show you this. There's the clutch fork on the floor. Let's move that out of the way. And you can see the phosphor bronze clutch bit there, and that would have sit in the slot inside the on the clutch there, that slot just behind that gear. And so you initially would take the clutch fork out first from out of the slot, out the hole here, and so you draw that out away, and then you would just take the driver out, take the pressure plate off, and then pull the driver out off the draw the driver off the crankshaft end there, and that would eventually allow for the pulley to be pulled out. Sorry about that. The pulley to be drawn out this way. Now, unfortunately, on the Model A, it's quite a big pulley and gear and that on the back, and I didn't have a lot of space between the end of the shaft and the wheel here. So in the end, I had to actually let the air out the tyre, lever the tyre back a bit and wiggle the pulley out. Obviously, if the splines were loose and that, you could have just moved the wheel out and it would have helped the job a lot. But on this situation, I just wiggled it out past the tyre. Now, it did come to my notice that once I'd taken the pistons and conrods out of this engine, that the flywheel here seemed to always not want to, it seemed to want to always turn back down to the bottom. There's the weight there that balances it, but every time I turned it over, it always wanted to turn back down and twist round. Now, these engines are all quite well balanced. The crankshaft, the flywheel and the driver, which is that thing there again, they tend to be balanced. So it made me think that someone had taken this to bits at some point and never realised that the driver, the clutch driver, has to go back on the end of the the crankshaft in a certain position. I've come across it a few times now, where they've just been banged back on and then thought they were right. But there is a specific way they go on, and on the Model A, there is a cutout, and the cutout is there, and there is a little arrow stamped into the end of the crankshaft, which lines up with a with a mark on the on here somewhere. Let's see where it's up actually. No, it's going to be too bright. But, just can't see it. It's a V. There it is. There's a V stamped in there. Now I'll show you what I mean. If I put the driver back on, I'll just put it back on willy-nilly, so that I'll put the driver back on willy-nilly. This one was extremely tight. I did have to put some heat on it. There, so I've just put that back on without lining it up. And if we move the crankshaft, move the crankshaft so that heavy balance weight on the flywheel is there, and as you can see, it wishes to just buzz round. The heavy weight in the flywheel is just letting it turn over. See, there we go. But if we line it up properly, and we'll try and do this holding the camera and freehand. So we can see that there's a little cutout as well, which sort of gives it away. But there's the arrow there. So if we do it properly and we line it up on the, I'm just going to line that up. There it is. It's there. I think that's correct. Yeah, cheers. So now the driver is correctly lined up on the crankshaft. There's that weight again over that side. Put the torch there, maybe see it. There's the weight, and yet you can position it anywhere you want and it doesn't move. So the crankshaft is back in balance again with the driver. So I can spin that over like that, and it will stop in any position and not just freewheel back to the bottom. So it's something to watch out for on these old tractors. Very important to get that driver lined up in the correct position on the crankshaft, because they are balanced as one piece. On the Model B, there's a little rivet and cutout on the. There's a rivet on the driver, and it slides onto the crankshaft in a particular position into a cutout on the crankshaft. I think in the Model B rebuild I did explain it as well in there. But no, so this engine would have had a bit of vibration to it when it was running, because as I say, it was certainly not balanced. One thing I took to bits as well was we took the bearing cap off that bearing there on the first. Well, I always call it the first motion shaft into the gearbox, but these are proper name for it, I forget now. But basically, that's the little stubby shaft that the big gear goes on inside here, and takes the drive into the gearbox. And as usual with all of these tractors, that bearing has collapsed due to lack of lubrication. One thing that you should do is put a little bit of grease in that bearing cap every so often, and just ensure that it's the bearing is lubricated in the bottom there. Now that one has movement on it. Oops, it's gone dark now. So if we get the spanner and just you see that there's movement on it. So that bearing is pretty much junk. Now to get this cover off, which is the next job, get the cover off here. I'm going to take this this dust cover off. You don't have to, but I'll take them off because it's easier to clean them up. And then you've got to slacken that nut off on that stubby shaft. Take that nut off. You'll have to jam the gearbox up somehow. And usually I put a screwdriver through the hole here. Obviously if I take this driver back off, it wants to come off, which obviously now it doesn't want to. There we go. Oops, bang. Take the driver off. You can see the gear in there. If you put a screwdriver on the tooth across the top of the crankshaft, you can get a lever on it, and then you'll be able to remove that nut down there. And what happens is when you pull all the bolts around the cover, you then draw the cover off this way and gently tapping that shaft, and the bearing and everything goes back in over and stops inside. I have seen them in the past where if the balls have all dropped out the ball bearing, the centre race, the middle race just comes off, is left on the shaft, and the outer race is left in the cover. One other thing you've got to do to be able to remove the cover is to remove the brake drum off this side. Now on the A, I see that they're only held on with 2 bolts, whereas on the B they're held on with 3. And it's a slightly different design of housing as well. But it's all just heavier duty, that's all it's about. And the A obviously is the bigger tractor, and so things are just that bit more heavier duty. So that's my next job. I'm going to try and remove the cover there, and we'll get that drawn off, and then we can get to this end of the crankshaft, and then we can get to the main bearings and start to think about removing the crankshaft. So yeah, so there we are, another bit of work done to it. Once we get the contents of the crankcase out, we can then see how the gear and bits and bobs that I want to get in there for the V8 conversion are going to fit. I think they should fit quite well. So yeah. Okay then, so I hope that wasn't too boring. It is late at night. I don't know what time it is this morning, so it's about 2:30 in the morning. So if I'm sounding a little bit vague, I do apologise. Okay then, thank you, bye.